4. An old Komori proverb has it that the only constant in the soul of man is inconstancy. Anything and everything else can pass out of fashion, even something as utilitarian as a hill stuffed full of corpses. Shades Hill was the first graveyard of quality in Comor's history, ideally situated to keep the bones of the formerly well-fed above the salty grasp of the Iron Sea. Yet over time, the balance of power shifted in the families of vault carvers and morticians and professional pallbearers. Fewer and fewer of the quality were interned on Shades Hill, as the nearby Hill of Whispers offered more room for larger and gaudier monuments with commensurately higher commissions. Wars, plagues, and intrigues ensured that the number of living families with monuments to tend on Shades Hill dropped steadily over the decades. Eventually, the only regular visitors were the priests and priestesses of Azaguia, who sleep in tombs during their apprenticeships, and the homeless orphans who squatted in the dust and darkness of the ill-tended burial vaults. The Thiefmaker, though of course he wasn't known as such just yet, had wound up sharing one of these vaults at the low point of his life, when he was nothing but a miserable curiosity, a pickpocket with 9 broken fingers. At first, his relationship with the Shades Hill orphans was half bullying and half pleading. Some vestigial need for an authority figure kept them from killing him in his sleep. For his part, he grudgingly began to explain to them some of the tricks of his trade. As his fingers slowly mended, after a fashion, for most of them would forever resemble twice-broken twigs, he began to impart more and more of his crooked wisdom onto the dirty children who dodged the rain and the city watch with him. Their numbers increased, as did their income, and they began to make more room for themselves in the wet stone chambers of the old graveyard. In time, the brittle-boned pickpocket became the Thiefmaker, and Shades Hill became his kingdom. The Lamora boy and his fellow Catchfire orphans entered this kingdom some 20 years after its founding. What they saw that night was a graveyard no deeper than the dirt piled above the old tombs. A great network of tunnels and galleries had been dug between the major vaults, their hard-packed walls threaded with supports like the ribs of long-dead wooden dragons. The previous occupants had all been quietly disinterred and dropped into the bay. Shades Hill was now an ant mound of orphan thieves. Down the black mouth of the topmost mausoleum, the Catchfire orphans went, down the wood-ribbed tunnel lit by the flickering silver fire of cool, alchemical globes, with greasy tendrils of mist chasing at their ankles. Shades Hill orphans watched them from every nook and warren, their eyes cold but curious. The thick tunnel air was saturated with the smells of night soil and stale bodies, an odor the Catchfire orphans soon multiplied with their own presence.
"In! In!"
cried the Thiefmaker, rubbing his hands together.
"My home, your home, and welcome to it. Here we all have one thing in common. No mothers and no fathers. Alas for that. But now you'll have as many sisters and brothers as you can need, and dry earth over your head. A place. A family."
A train of Shades Hill orphans swept down the tunnel in his wake, snuffing their eerie blue candles as they went, until only the silver radiance of the wall globes remained to light the way. At the heart of the Thiefmaker's realm was a vast warm hollow with a packed dirt floor, perhaps twice the height of a tall man, 30 yards wide and long. A single high-backed chair of oiled black witchwood stood against the far wall. The Thiefmaker eased himself into this with a grateful sigh. Dozens of grotty blankets were set out on the floor, covered with food. Bowls of bony chicken marinated in cheap almond wine, soft thresherfish tails wrapped in bacon and soaked in vinegar, and brown bread flavored with sausage grease. There were also salted peas and lentils, as well as bowls of past-ripe tomatoes and pears. Poor stuff, in truth, but in a quantity and variety most of the Catchfire orphans had never seen before. Their attack on the meal was immediate and uncoordinated. The Thiefmaker smiled indulgently.
I'm not stupid enough to get between you and a decent meal, my dears. So eat your fill. Eat more than your fill. Make up for lost time. We'll talk after.
As the Catchfire orphans stuffed their faces, the Shades Hill orphans crowded in around them, watching and saying nothing. Soon the chamber was packed, and the air grew staler still. The feasting continued until there was literally nothing left. The survivors of the Black Whisper sucked the last vinegar and grease from their fingers, and then turned their eyes warily to the Thiefmaker and his minions. The Thiefmaker held up 3 crooked fingers, as though on cue.
"Business!" he cried. 3 items of business. You're here because I paid for you. I paid extra to get to you before anyone else could. I can assure you that every single one of your little friends that I didn't pay for has gone to the slavers. There's nothing else to be done with orphans. No place to keep you, nobody to take you in. The watch sells your salt for wine money, my dears. Watch sergeants neglect to mention you in their reports, and watch captains neglect to give a shit. And, he continued, now that the Catchfire quarantine's lifted, every slaver and would-be slaver in Camor is going to be very excited and very alert. You're free to get up and leave this hill any time you see fit, with my confident assurance that you'll soon be sucking cocks or chained to an oar for the rest of your life. Which leads me to my second point. All of my friends you see around you, he gestured to the Shades Hill orphans lined up against the walls, can leave whenever they please, and mostly go wherever they please, because they are under my protection. I know, he said with a long and solemn face, that I am nothing especially formidable when considered as an individual, but do not be misled. I have powerful friends, my dears. What I offer is security by virtue of those friends. Should anyone, a slaver for example, dare to set a hand on one of my Shades Hill boys or girls, well, the consequences would be immediate and gratifyingly, merciless.
When none of his newcomers seemed appropriately enthusiastic, the Thiefmaker cleared his throat.
I'd have the miserable fucking bastards killed! Savvy?
They were indeed.
Which brings us neatly to my third item of interest, namely, all of you. This little family always needs new brothers and sisters, and you may consider yourselves invited, encouraged no less, to, condescend to offer us the pleasure of your intimate and permanent acquaintance. Make this hill your home, myself your master, and these fine boys and girls your trusted siblings. You'll be fed, sheltered, and protected. Or you can leave right now and end up as fresh fruit in some whorehouse in Jerem. Any takers?
None of the newcomers said anything.
I knew I could count on you, my dear, dear Catchfire jewels.
The Thiefmaker spread his arms wide and smiled, revealing a half-moon of teeth brown as swamp water.
But of course, there must be responsibilities. There must be give and take, like for like. Food doesn't sprout from my arsehole. Chamber pots don't empty themselves. Catch my meaning?
There were hesitant nods from about half the Catchfire orphans.
The rules are simple. You'll learn them all in good time. For now, let's keep it like this. Anybody who eats, works. Anyone who works, eats. Which brings us to my fourth... Oh dear. Children. Do an absent-minded old man the favour of imagining that he held up 4 fingers. This is my fourth important point. Now, we've got our chores here on the hill. But we've got chores elsewhere that also need doing. Other jobs. Delicate jobs, unusual jobs, fun and interesting jobs, all about the city, some by day and some by night. They will require courage, deftness and, discretion. We would so love to have your assistance with these special tasks. He pointed to the one boy he hadn't paid for, the small hanger-on, now staring up at him with hard, sullen eyes above a mouth still plastered with tomato innards. You, surplus boy, 31st of 30, what say you? Are you the helpful sort? Are you willing to assist your new brothers and sisters with their interesting work? The boy mulled this over for a few seconds. You mean, he said in a high, thin voice, that you want us to steal things? The old man stared down at the little boy for a very long time, while a number of the Shades Hill orphans giggled behind their hands. Yes, the thief-maker said at last, nodding slowly. I might just mean that. Though you have a very, uncompromising view of a certain exercise of personal initiative that we prefer to frame in more artfully indeterminate terms. Not that I expect that to mean anything to you. What's your name, boy? Lamora. Your parents must have been misers to give you nothing but a surname. What else did they call you? The boy seemed to think very deeply about this. I'm called Locke, he finally said, after my father. Very good. Rolls right off the tongue, it does. Well, Locke after your father, Lamora, you come here and have a word with me. The rest of you shuffle off. Your brothers and sisters will show you where you'll be sleeping tonight. They'll also show you where to empty this and where to put that. Chores, if you savvy. Just to tidy this hall up for now, but there'll be more jobs for you in the days to come. I promise it will all make sense by the time you find out what they call me in the world beyond our little hill. Locke moved to stand beside the thief-maker on his high-backed throne. The throng of newcomers rose and milled about until larger, older Shades Hill orphans began collaring them and issuing simple instructions. Soon enough, Locke and the master of Shades Hill were as alone as they could hope to be. My boy, the thief-maker said, I'm used to having to train a certain reticence out of my new sons and daughters when they first arrive in Shades Hill. Do you know what reticence is? The Lamora boy shook his head. His greasy, dust-brown bangs were plastered down atop his round little face, and the tomato stains around his mouth had grown drier and more unseemly. The thief-maker dabbed delicately these stains with one cuff of his tattered blue coat. The boy didn't flinch. It means they've been told that stealing things is bad, and I need to work around that until they get used to the idea. Savvy? Well, you don't seem to suffer from any such reticence, so you and I might just get along. Stolen before, have you? The boy nodded. Before the plague, even? Another nod. Thought so. My dear, dear boy, you didn't, lose your parents to the plague now, did you? The boy looked down at his feet and barely shook his head. So, you've already been, looking after yourself for some time. It's nothing to be ashamed of now. It might even secure you a place of some respect here, if only I can find a means to put you to the test. By way of response, the Lamora boy reached under his rags and held something out to the thief-maker. 2 small leather purses fell into the old man's open palm. Cheap things, stiff and stained, with frayed cords around their necks. Where did you get these, then? The watchman, Locke whispered. Some of the watchmen picked us up and carried us. The thief-maker jerked back as though an asp had just sunk its fangs into his spine,
and stared down at the purses with disbelief.
You lifted these from the fucking city watch? From the Yellow Jackets?
Locke nodded more enthusiastically.
They picked us up and carried us.
Gods! The thief-maker whispered.
Oh, gods! You may have just fucked us all superbly, look after your father Lamora. Quite superbly indeed.